Roll.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Councilmember Curtis?
Here.
Councilmember Danuski? Here. Mayor Baker?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Here.
Councilmember Herbig?
Here.
Councilmember Sperry?
Here.
Thank you.
Laura, you can just stay. If you'll please stand and join me in the flag salute. Yeah. Without giving Laura a chance here to get situated. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You know, I could probably just land.
Let you do that.
Thank you.
Eat the apples. Eat apples. Why did you My feels warm? Yeah. Actually, it should drop back down by then.
It's on 2-hour postponed. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, the agenda will stand approved as written. Citizen comments, it's an opportunity to talk to us about issues that are important to you and to the community. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, in difference to those who do respect the 3-minute time. Clerk, call the first person.
There's no one signed up.
Anybody wishing to stand up and be heard? Anybody wishing to be heard? Public comments. Public comments are closed. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Councilmember Herbig.
I'm just going to let you know that I'm going to be abstaining from this.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Yes, we just did. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Any further comments? No comments. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Abstaining?
Me? I don't know what you say to that. I'm abstaining.
So we had 6 aye and 1 abstention. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of the 2015 Surface Water Master Plan. Mr. Sawyer, Water Program Manager.
Good evening. Yes. So I don't have a formal presentation or anything prepared. You saw a few weeks ago the draft plan that we presented, and we received comments from council, and then we had a public open house, received comments, questions, and provided you with a final draft last week. And I didn't receive any questions or comments or any additional requests from council, so I'm here this evening to just have council provide approval to adopt the final draft that was provided as the 2015 Surface Water Master Plan.
So is there any further questions? Any comments? Chair will entertain a motion to adopt the 2015 Surface Water Master Plan. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And I'll second. Any further discussion? Motion in front of us to adopt the 2015 Surface Water Master Plan. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
7-0.
Next item on the agenda is SR 522, update and adoption of resolution number 15-255, amendment to change order of authority for 522 West A project. Mrs. Overleys, Public Works Director. Mr. Vaughn. Hank's father.
We all love Hank, I want you to know that.
Not enough for you to retire immediately, though.
There's work at hand
But
here.
we're working on it.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're here this evening to request council action to amend the change order policy for the 522 project and to give a brief construction update on what's occurred to date. As council is aware, change orders happen. Construction projects experience some level of errors or omissions in the contract plans and documents, and often contractors find things in the field and change conditions occur. The existing staff authority limits within the confines of the project budget is city engineer $25,000 and city manager $50,000. We're proposing to amend that for the 522 project only, obviously within the confines of the approved project budget, and to establish a change order approval authority for the project manager of $10,000, increase the public works director, city engineer to $50,000, and increase the city manager to $150,000. And we're doing this to improve the efficiency in processing the change orders, and this will allow staff to administratively approve most change orders that we come across, and also to reduce the potential for contractor delays and additional costs during construction. With approving change orders, there's many checks and balances. All project change orders are prepared by experienced construction management staff and their consultants, KBA. They're thoroughly evaluated for legitimacy and entitlement, include an assessment of the change as it relates to the contract documents and an independent engineer's estimate. There's also, it's very thoroughly reviewed internally by KBA and also city staff and WashDOT, since they're our certification agency. With that, I thought we'd take a moment to, before we get into the project update, to recommend adoption of Resolution 15255, amending the change order policy for the 522 project, and take any questions that you may have on this.
Questions?
Yeah,
Councilman Smith.
I'm just curious, is there I don't have a problem with this, I'm just wondering if there's an aggregate amount that has to be approved or anything?
I think there is, not an accurate amount, there's an amount though, right?
This project will be within budget, and there's a contingency budget for this project, and we won't be able to approve anything above that contingency amount.
Okay.
When we awarded the construction contract, we requested authorization to see, which is roughly $1 million for the West Day project, which is budgeted.
So anything over that, I guess, then.
Great.
Councilmember Herbig.
So I'm reading through Exhibit A that's referenced in the resolution, and I'm having trouble finding the language that specifically limits the changes to just this project. Could you point that out to me?
It should be right in the title, exclusively for the West Day project. I don't have that in front of me, but
It says resolution adopting updated purchasing and contracting policies and procedures and repealing resolutions, 2 previous resolutions about the same topic. And the only therefore is that it'll update things to reflect what's in Exhibit A and repeal the 2 previous.
is that are you looking at maybe the older ordinance that were?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm looking at what we have provided
Okay.
here, which is the resolution and then just this big part of the policies and procedures manual covering purchasing and contract policies and procedures. And I'm just trying to find, if this is the Exhibit A that's being referenced, I'm trying to find what is it in this that limits this to this project. That's
Change orders Part B, I think.
Oh, so the attachment Part B is the new. Is that correct, Patty?
Where you have Section 1 or the amendment, and then under that there's a B. Under change orders, there's a B, and it says may approve changes to work or contract for the SR 522 West A project.
Okay, sorry, where am I looking, in the resolution or in the
Resolution.
Let's make sure we're looking at the right resolution, 15-255.
Oh, okay. I'll have that.
Part B.
We'll go towards the bottom.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
But that absolutely was our intent, that it was for West A only.
I wasn't questioning that, I just wanted to make sure, the correct sideboards were there, that's all. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify here. After you were talking about contingencies of about $1 million, the mayor said this is for anything over that. And I'm not sure that's what this is. Gives you the authority to accept change orders up to that contingency amount. After that, you have to have a budget.
That's correct.
A budget
That
modification
contingency is
amendment.
about $1 million.
Yeah, but it's within that, not above it.
No, it's within that.
Within that, okay.
That's correct.
I just want to clarify that.
I apologize for not having the resolution in front of me.
I apologize too, because I can't bring it up on my iPad. So you're going to have this back.
Any other questions?
No, that's okay.
Anything, you got more, Ken?
I can't.
I don't this time.
You don't? Okay. So I guess the chair will entertain a motion to adopt resolution 15-255, amending the change order policy for the 522 West A project.
So moved?
Second.
Move and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
7-0.
All right. Thank you very much.
Kenmore?
So right now, we're looking at the preliminary contractor schedule they have submitted to us. Essentially, the work is divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 is the north side, which is what we're seeing out there now, where we've closed the westbound bat lane, and they're just starting that work. And that's supposed to go through September of this year. And then they move on to the south side of the road, and they do the regrading of the 61st south leg and all the sidewalk improvements on the south side. That takes us through the first quarter of 2016. And phase 3 is the medians and paving, which brings us through the second quarter. And this is assuming that every day is sunny and there's no issues out there. So we fully expect that the construction will go into the next construction season. Construction started on the 13th, and they have 280 working days at this time to complete the work. The asterisk noting that the night work, and the contractor has requested night work to do some utility crossings at 61st. That's their first, basically, order of work. They've requested the maximum amount of time, which is 4 weeks. And although their schedule says that it probably will happen in 2 weeks, and they're proposing to close the road in the evenings from 8 to 5 in the morning. So they'll be open for the AM commute, and that is starting tomorrow.
So I've seen some of the comments you had on noise control and that. Are we going to try to enforce that as much as possible? Because remembering last time.
So they submitted a temporary permit to do the night work, and they're conditioned to use quiet backup alarms, temporary noise shields around stationary equipment like generators and light plants, saw cutting early in the shift, so that, I mean, that operation is really loud, and taking measures to reduce the drop height when you're dropping, rocks and rubble into trucks and whatnot.
And the big sheet of steel to close it up before the traffic comes in the morning?
It will be plated and sealed before it's
Right,
opened up each
It'll be
day.
quiet when they drop it at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, right?
I hope so.
Well, and I'd like to add that in all the work that I've done, this is something we created for this project was a noise control plan. I mean, we've always had, you had to give variances for night work and you would talk with a contractor about making things quiet and things they could do, but we actually put this in the contract documents where they have to create a noise plan. And enforcement is important, so our inspector, we'll have an inspector out there and they'll know what's in that noise plan, they'll have a copy of it, and they'll be fully prepared to enforce that noise control plan. It's still construction and there's still going to be noise, but we've racked our brains and they're doing the things we could think to have them do.
Councilmember Herbie.
Chris just answered my question, so thank you.
No.
And there will be a detour in place during the evening closures. We'll be sending the traffic to 68th and 181st. They have the opportunity to use other streets if they choose, but that's the safest route that we could think of.
Councilmember Curtis.
I'm sure there's some really good reason, but I'm just curious. I'm noticing that you're doing the north side during the nice parts of the year and the south side during the winter. And it seems like the south side has more steep slopes and more issues. Intuitively, I would have done it backwards, but I'm not an engineer.
Or a contractor.
Or either one, yes.
They pick.
We're truly hoping that they can really get going on this construction on the north side and get in and do the grading in early September. It'll be the tail end of the summer, but they'll have to address all the issues that come with that. Erosion control and rain delays potentially. You would look at that and you would conclude that might be a good idea, but that's not what we did.
No particular reason.
I believe it has something to do with keeping all the PED detours in place and the bus stops and getting all the work in front of the majority of the businesses done. And also, it does, when you do that work on 61st South, the amount of PEDs and bikes on the Burke-Gilman Trail is probably a little bit less during that time frame. But really, there's
just curious.
Yeah, one side has to be done before the other, and we chose the north side. So.
Councilmember Sperry.
Thank you. I was curious about the BAT lane, the bus and transit lane. So will it be open at all during this time, especially the one towards Seattle, the westbound one?
It'll be closed through the first phase.
Okay.
So through September, what they're currently showing.
So at least another 5 months or so. Okay.
Yeah.
Your Honor.
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah. I have a question just so I understand exactly what's closed. So it'll be just the westbound lanes and both of them, or just one?
Just the westbound BAT lane will be closed completely during the phase one. There will be times when the contractor does request an additional lane closure of a traveled lane, but we have full authority to approve those.
But for the nighttime work, the closure, can you tell me specifically what lanes are closing for that?
For the nighttime work, the entire 61st north leg will be closed from 8 till 5. So vehicles will have to go to 68th or go one of the side streets to get up through 61st.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand. Thank you.
Is it really?
There will be local access only, so there will be a Type 3 barricade at 181st saying you can still get to the driveways of Jack in the Box and the tavern and the mini mall there, but it's for local access only.
I guess I'm a little concerned routing traffic through the neighborhoods, considering issues that we saw.
We aren't. The detours will be down 181st and then to 68th. So that will be what the signage will say. So we aren't routing people that way. Should people choose to take a different route than what we recommend, they can.
So 181st to where?
68th.
To 68.
Mm-hmm.
And the traffic volumes, they reduce significantly, in the evening. But we've also done some traffic tube counts at several of the locations off of 522, and we'll be monitoring that as construction goes on to see if there has been any changes.
So if I wanted to get up to Ken Lake Avenue, or I wanted to get up to, is that 60th it goes off, 61st it goes up into Ballard?
Ballard.
Not in Ballard.
Ballard?
I'm sorry, Briar.
I was like,
I think Briar.
I don't know.
62nd.
So if I was coming from Lake Forest Park and it's after 8 o'clock at night, between 8 and 5 in the morning, I would, I could go up 60th and go around that way. A lot of people do that already in that gap in the curb. I will go past 61st. The detour signage will send people to 68th. So people that don't know the area are going to be sent to another signal to get where they need to go that way. But for locals who know where they're going, could choose to take, is it 62nd, 63rd, could take any of those side streets if they wanted to.
Will 68th be open northbound from 181st?
68th is
I
going
mean,
to be...
61st, I'm sorry. Will 61st
Yes.
northbound be open?
Yep. And that signal will function. It's the short piece between 522 and 181st that will be restricted for everyone, however businesses are accessible.
And we're directing the traffic to 68th, but the two-way left turn lane on 522 will be open, so vehicles could choose 62nd or 63rd if they wanted. We looked at options, of using 62nd, but the sight distances and the crossing travel lanes and whatnot, we just thought that 68th was the best option.
Any other questions? City Manager.
Yeah, I just want to reemphasize something Kent said earlier. This schedule that you see is a best case scenario. And officially, I'm telling people that this is a 2-year project. So, first half of 2017 is what I'm telling people. Because as Kent indicated earlier, we could have a really wet winter, and the contractor could opt to just winter over and close everything down during the wet months, which delays the project that much longer. So,
If we have a really horrible winter, the contractor could ask for a suspension, and we likely would give it. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because one thing we often see is if we have a rainy day, the weather has to impact the contractor's critical path of work. And if it impacts their critical path of work, we will not charge them a working day. However, the contractor could have 2 crews doing something else. So it gets kind of frustrating when you see people are out there, they're still working, yet the contract seems to go longer and longer and longer because of the working days. So just know that just because there's people out there working, maybe it could not be critical work, which means the contractor's not getting charged working days. Working days work like a bank. They start with a certain number, and every day that is a nice weather day, we charge them a day. So as time goes on, the number of days gets to be less and less and less and less and less.
and then Kent, could you also talk about the closure of the 61st south leg and how long it will be closed?
So the 61st south leg, once they're done phase 1, will be 90 calendar days. And we did get a permit from King County and provide notice to them, but it will be October, November timeframe.
So Burt Gilman Trail will be closed during that time.
There'll be a detour in place that goes partially through the driveway to Log Boom Park. That'll be all closed off.
So the trail will be open and it'll be rerouted. And that's something our contractor will do.
And Hank will be on top of that, right?
He's out there.
They'll be out there. Yeah. And I will apologize up front. One thing you're going to hear a lot from me over the next couple of years, people like to ask us, well, when is this little step in the contract going to be done and this little step going to be done? And we will always tell you the best we can based on what we know that day, but we don't control weather. We don't control things we find in the ground. And at my old place of work, I had the nickname weather permitting over lease, because when we were under construction, I was teased that that's what they were going to put on my tombstone, because every time they asked me about a project and when things were going to get done, I'd say, well, weather permitting, kind of here's the time frame. So to ask for your patience, if you ask when something will be done, we'll say, well, weather permitting, and based on what's going today, here's what we think. But the only thing the contractor is responsible for doing is delivering the entire project when they are done with the project. We don't have interim must-dos built into the contract. We chose not to do that. So as we go, we can't make them get the signal done at any certain time. We can't make them regrade the road at any certain time. They're responsible for their means and methods, and we're responsible for making sure they do it within the guidelines of the construction documents. So again, I'm sorry, up front, you'll hear a lot of weather permittings out of me, and Kent too.
I feel much better. I mean, Hank's on the job right here, black and white, so.
That's a handout that our consultants in Bio Issues had went through on 181st and 61st just today, and provided that for advance notice for this additional night work that's happening, and they'll be going out sporadically as things progress with these.
And about our 24-hour hotline as well. We should mention that. And that is for businesses to use whenever they need to. That is the best way to notify the city if there's a loose plate on the road, if there's some cones that are out of alignment, if there's somebody parking a piece of equipment where they shouldn't. That hotline is for the community to let us know what they're seeing if there's a problem. And that phone is staffed 24 hours a day by Enviro Issues. Mm-hmm. And we just ask that only if it's a true emergency do you call it 2 in the morning. People call thinking they're going to leave a message and they just got a body. So it is carried 24/7 by part of our team.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda. Joint planning commissioning meeting with discuss planning preliminary recommendations, 2015 comprehensive plan amendments. Mrs. Bent, Lori Anderson, and I guess the planning commission.
I think it's wherever you want. Name tags are...
Good evening, Council. So while everybody's getting themselves settled, just kind of give a brief reminder of why we're here tonight with the Planning Commission in front of you. So as you know, there is a state-mandated deadline of the end of June this year for having your comprehensive plan updated. And we have taken the approach that most of the elements are on sort of a rolling update. If you remember, we've updated some major sections of the comprehensive plan over the last few years. And so what was remaining is we've updated the vision statement, the housing element, and we utilized ARCH in that effort, the utilities element, and public services element, and we've also added some policies around healthy active living in response to a new state requirement, sustainability. So those are the substantive items in the comprehensive plan that we are sort of bringing forward to give the Council a preview and the opportunity to ask questions, comment, or give any direction. The Planning Commission will be holding their public hearing tomorrow evening to take public testimony on all the comprehensive plan update. We're not prepared right now to bring forward all the elements. When we bring this back to you in June, it will be a big document. But mainly that because we're updating all background sections of each element, and we're making some minor tweaks here and there. But what is in front of you now is sort of the meatier part of the update. So that's what's in front of you this evening. And I'm going to turn it over to Laurie Anderson to kind of run through some of those, the major changes that are in the packet before you.
Good evening, Mayor Baker and council members, and Chair Nugent and commissioners. I have a very brief presentation of some of the highlights from the elements that are in front of you for discussion tonight. It's going to take about 5 minutes, and then you can begin your conversation. So the first thing I wanted to touch on was the vision statement. As you recall, we did a survey at the beginning of the year, a public survey, and then we presented those results at your last joint meeting with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission looked at those results. They reorganized and tried to prioritize the statements, so the ones that they felt were most important were moved to the top of the vision statement. One thing, a new focus was on the notion of a vibrant waterfront community, and I think that was added into the very initial phrase of this revised vision statement to recognize the importance of the waterfront to the community. They eliminated a phrase about public priorities and how projects are assigned. They didn't really think that fit well with the vision statement for the community. They added a new concept about local arts and culture, so that is a new item. Most of the others are from the original vision statement. They've been in some cases abbreviated to make it more pointed or less cumbersome, the language. In some cases, the Planning Commission wanted to refine a little bit. So that is a summary of what is going on with the vision statement. The housing element was something that the Planning Commission reviewed last fall, and they worked with Regional Coalition for Housing, ARCH, on that. ARCH did the background work and helped draft the policies in response to the King County countywide planning policies. And so the Planning Commission added some focus on housing options and services for seniors. They also recognize the city's role in supporting affordable housing comparable to the needs identified in the countywide planning policies. And a significant implementation strategy is a housing strategy plan, which would be a future document that really set out specific actions that the city could take in satisfying their housing interests. The public services element was done in conjunction with a number of agencies. The North Shore School District was one. We talked to Kenmore Library staff. We also talked to some of the human service providers if they did not have a website that provided the information that we needed to update the background information. And in all of these elements, I should point out that the background information, the beginning of the chapter where it talks about existing conditions, all of those were changed and rewritten. They don't show in the underlined strike-through format, but all of that information is new and was done in conjunction with the service providers. So the Planning Commission added a new policy about supporting community engagement techniques that reflected a diversity of voices. That was a change in that element. And then they added an implementation strategy that would request, ask, encourage human services providers to really give updated information on human services needs in Kenmore, where there were gaps in services to those who live in Kenmore, and then some information on how those gaps would be filled. As we looked at the background information for the comprehensive plan, the last time the comprehensive plan was updated, there had recently been a survey done by King County that provided a wealth of information about human services needs in North County. We did not have that same level of information this time, and that was where this implementation strategy came from, to try to have a better understanding of needs and gaps. So the utilities element talks about gas, electricity, water, sewer, that kind of thing. And so those elements were reviewed with Puget Sound Energy. We drafted information and sent it off to them to have them review it to make sure it was accurate. The North Shore Utility District reviewed the sections about water and sewer. And then we had a discussion with help from the city attorney's office about franchises and the sort of the role of franchises. That was more background information. But a new policy recommended by the Planning Commission was that a new policy be added to focus on excellent service from those who held franchises with the city, if it were possible to regulate that, and it's not always possible. They included policies about increasing opportunities for future utility undergrounding and minimizing impacts of personal wireless service, towers, poles, etc. And a significant implementation measure for this chapter would be to look at regulations related to wind, solar, thermal energy, alternative energy sources. So those were the elements, and then as a separate discussion, they talked about policies for healthy, active living and sustainability. So the State Growth Management Act has language that requires that cities' land use elements talk about and support strategies that encourage land use patterns that result in a more healthy community. I guess the relationship between transportation and housing and that kind of a thing. And our comprehensive plan, Kenmore's comprehensive plan, already contains a number of policies that address that issue about land use patterns and multimodal transportation and that kind of thing. So there wasn't a lot to add there, but they did add a couple of policies. They also added some policies that were sort of prompted by the city's interest in the Let's Move campaign. So that you saw when you read through that there were some policies there, and there were some food policy recommendations. Those are new. Those came directly from the King County countywide planning policies, which talk about food policy. So we, in our effort to reflect those countywide policies, added some minor policies about that. And then the sustainability policies, the main implementation strategy is to develop a sustainability action plan that would identify measures the city could take to encourage sustainability in the community. They added a couple of other policies, but again, very minor in nature, and they're actually found in different elements. There's one about safe hazardous waste disposal, for example, that ended up in the utilities section and that kind of thing. So that's just a real brief overview of the information.
Councilmember Curtis.
I have a question on housing 5.1. It says it's referring to targets set by looks like the Washington State Office of Financial Management. So it says the household target for Kenmore is 3,500. That seemed, and it looked like they're referring to 2006 through 2031. That seems like a very small target for that many years, especially in relationship to the Vision 2040 that predicts we'll eventually have 40,000 people. I mean, even if you figured 2 people per household, that's only 7,000 people growth within that many years. I don't quite understand the discrepancy.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. So the targets, those targets were established in 2006, and the horizon goes to 2031. We're actually planning for 2035. But that is a countywide effort to establish the targets. It's not something that Kenmore independently does. It's done in conjunction with all of the other communities in the region. And so the action of adopting those targets actually came before the council several years ago, and they have not changed since that original discussion. So our targets have not changed since they were adopted a few years ago, and the other jurisdictions haven't either. So I don't quite know how to respond to the question except to say that those are our adopted targets. They're part of a countywide framework. We can't independently adjust our targets.
Not that we necessarily want to, but somewhere between now and 2031, they'll set new targets.
Yes, I would expect.
Councilmember Danuski.
Thank you, Planning Commission, for doing this. It's a lot of work. I have a question. Actually, I have a few questions, but I'll just start with one. On the vision statement, you changed the words healthy lifestyle to healthy citizenry. And just a comment on my preference, I actually like the healthy lifestyle wording better. Healthy citizenry, I don't know if I'm supposed to, help my neighbors or be a volunteer or whatever, but it's in the, parks and everything, and healthy lifestyle type sentence. So I don't know. I guess my personal preference would be to go back to healthy lifestyles on that. I don't know if anybody else has that thought.
Yeah, I certainly see your point.
And I would defer to, I think it was Commissioner Orenshaw that brought that one up. So
yeah, I'll fess up to being the the person who said. I think it came from. We remember the survey that came out about the vision statement, and there were a few comments that kind of pushed back against the word lifestyle, sort of suggesting that the city shouldn't be, intervening in people's lifestyles. So I think citizenry was an attempt to be sort of neutral, and so that's the genesis of it from our perspective.
But there may be other language that,
Yeah, it was just a little, it was
healthy
kind of
residents
vague for me
would
or
work
something
too,
like that.
that doesn't get at citizenry and, so we
Citizenry
could play
seemed
with
to
that.
open it up quite a bit. So that was just a thought on mine. I guess I'll go with another two. We kind of grouped these we ranked them a little bit this time, I think. And if so, I know we're really working on volunteers and volunteerism, but we put that last. And I don't know if residents would notice that or not, that we put them last as far as volunteers. But just another thought.
yeah, and I'm happy to respond to that. And it sort of, council member brings up priorities and how do you rank these, where do they come in, and we talked a lot about that. So I'll give you a little more info on our thinking behind the vision statement. First of all, we wanted it to be short so that it encourages people to actually read it. Secondly, we wanted to put it in active voice. There are places in the old
I like that.
vision statement that were passive voice. I think it conveys more power in active voice. And then we thought about what distinguishes Kenmore from other cities. Every city is going to have a vision statement. They're full of, for lack of a better word, platitudes. Everybody wants, public services and parks and good schools and everything else. Anybody could say that. And we were thinking about, who's our target audience for this? And it's mostly businesses and residents that we want to attract to Kenmore that will energize and contribute economically and socially. What distinguishes Kenmore? What would make this vision statement stand out to that target audience? And we thought that the biggest asset, the most distinctive feature of our community was its waterfront, Lake Washington, its parks, and its recreational assets. So if you look at the top 3 items on this list, they go to those points, those assets. That's the first thing we want our target audience to think about. Then the next 3 items talk about our downtown and our economic vision, because we are trying to build a downtown. People drive through Kenmore, they don't think we have a downtown, they may not think we have a plan for a downtown. You know better than we do how much emphasis citizens in this community have put historically on having a real downtown, a walkable downtown, some density and some business concentration. So those are the next 3 items. And then the remaining items are the vision of and for our citizens. And I can understand, council member, why you would think volunteerism should be higher. You could probably make an argument for anything on here should be higher. They're all really important. But we want to stand out. Every community could say, hey, we want volunteers, we want to link arms, and we do. And you've been an active volunteer prior to being on the council, and a lot of other people here have too. So it's not to minimize anything, but we're trying to kind of sell Kenmore with this vision statement. And that's why we put it in the order we did.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Smith.
Actually, my questions are to do with the housing element, and I'd be more than happy to finish the discussion on the vision statement, since we're on it and we're into the meat of it right now, and I don't have any questions on it.
I like the format that you guys have done too, that you shortened it up, that you've made it a little bit more concise. I tend to agree a little bit with Stacy, Councilmember Danuski, in that we have been putting a lot of emphasis on the volunteers and the volunteers in the community, and if this is ranked or whatever, it would be nicer to see them a little bit higher in the list. But your comments had a sense of purpose about them, and I think they were reflecting what we were trying to do with the downtown and everything else, and the waterfront and all the other stuff. So I do see, but it would be nice if they were a little bit higher. Anything else on the vision? Councilmember Sperry?
Thank you. Well, I do definitely like the direction. I kept thinking, oh, I want it shorter, and then I looked at the first draft, so thank you. It is shorter. And I definitely do like the emphasis on the waterfront. I think that came through loud and clear in the survey. One of the things the terms that did get some negative on the survey was the higher density housing. And was there any discussion about that particular term or other ways to approach it? You've kind of linked it to downtown, which may have been part of the strategy.
Right. I'm going to defer if anybody else on the commission wants to respond to that. I don't know. Commissioner Serebnik might have had a comment on that because you were really attentive to what the survey said. I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if anybody else wants to.
That's the only problem.
I was just maybe wondering if anybody thought like multifamily or something like that, because
Right.
usually density, people think not in my neighborhood, even though I know you're connecting it to downtown here.
I'm just looking for the one that talks about the
Sure,
density.
and that's okay
but-
too. It'll be interesting, when you do have the public feedback, if that pops up again.
Well, I think in fairness,
absolutely, yeah.
Commissioner Serebnik picked that out, and she was looking not just at our draft, but she was saying, hey, look at the survey results. This could be, this is something of concern for people. So I don't know, Commissioner, if you want to elaborate.
I think we definitely recognize that the survey suggested it was an issue of concern. I think in maybe earlier drafts, the higher density wasn't specific to it wasn't clear that it was specific to the downtown, and I think we might have made it clearer, but I can't remember all of the iterations. So that was one piece. And I think, we went kind of back and forth on it, and I think, in the rest of the comp plan, there was a recognition that we are moving in the direction of high density housing in the downtown, and that's been kind of the vision for a while, despite the fact that there is some discomfort. So I think there was a recognized tension, but we went with it anyway, and I'm sure we'll hear about it tomorrow.
Well, I don't know if multifamily would do the same thing. It doesn't sound quite as packed in. Anyway. The other thing, kind of going back to what was mentioned earlier about the volunteerism, I think what's changed is we had our workshop with the Peter Kasagama? Is that right? Kagayama, thank you. And now we have this new vocabulary of co-creators and things like that. And so it'll be interesting to see, if that comes up in your feedback, and that could be something that does distinguish us if we start putting terms like that in there. And I think the other thing he kept talking about is where's the fun? And I'm stealing another council member's thing here, but I don't know if we could have fun in there somewhere. I mean, no other city has that. So.
Yeah, and those are good points. First of all, with respect to volunteerism, as I said, we broke it down into 3 categories. The last category has 8 items, and if volunteerism should be higher, you certainly can keep consistent with our scheme for the priorities and move volunteerism all the way up to, the first on that segment. So that's one way to do it and still be consistent. I should point out too, we're not married to this language. It's not life and death if we go with density versus multifamily. I mean, I think Commissioner Serebnik conveyed that. I think lifestyles there's a lot of wordsmithing that goes on with this. It's somewhat subjective. So don't feel like we're going to be offended if you go and change one to the other word. There's good reasons for it.
Councilmember Curtis, I know you got a question, but back on this one of healthy citizenry, because I know that's been important to you, was health of the community and trying to be a little bit more proactive in some of the things. So I know you have a question, Councilmember Curtis, but any suggestions on there to fit more with what we're doing with the kids in that?
What was the previous suggestion that we had instead of citizenry?
It was lifestyle.
Lifestyles, but as was pointed out, lifestyles, the survey said didn't want government messing in their lifestyles. So.
To me, I don't think, I could go either way, as long as the word healthy is in there. It's something about exercise in parks.
There you go.
I'm okay. Whoever's doing it, I don't care who's doing it, just so they're all doing it. Yeah, so I'm okay either way. I could think of pros and cons of either one, and nothing definitely wins out over the other. My question was, if you move volunteerism up, which I think it should be moved up, then the question is who's at the bottom. So even though we know all 8 at the bottom are kind of at the bottom, and I would move the support local arts, culture, and history to the bottom, and I'd just move everything else up 1 notch, and that'd be really my change.
So anything else on vision?
Yeah.
Because I know there's a number on housing. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah. I don't think these are priority ranked. Maybe people will read it as such, but they're all important, or we wouldn't list them at all if they weren't important. So I don't know the order's that particularly important, and so they're all there. So it's not a priority thing. I'm trying to figure out where we could put something like the word fun in here. Enjoyable lifestyle. Something like that. I don't know. But something that indicates that we are, as a city, striving to live a better, healthier, more enjoyable life. I don't know the wording. It doesn't come to me, but there was some discussion after Peter Kageyama talked to us that fun ought to be part of the city of Kenmore, and he showed us a bunch of ways where we could do that. Citizens came up with things.
One suggestion, and it could go anywhere, but if you look at that first statement where we emphasize a vibrant waterfront community, you could say, in 2035, we see Kenmore as a fun and vibrant waterfront community. That's one place. I mean, there are many others. If you're going to incorporate it somewhere, if you feel that's a sort of an important statement that you want to have sort of rippling through the rest of the vision statement, and that might be one place to put it, but there are certainly others.
I'd go for that. Yeah.
You know, the second bullet there supports an active, healthy citizenry, right? But then you come down toward the end and you've got supports safety, health, and welfare. So, you know, I like the active part, and it certainly ties in with what we're trying to do with the kids. And so maybe it's active lifestyles or something, and, you know, you got the health down below. I don't know. Just a thought. But anything else on vision? Councilmember Smith.
Okay. On the housing element, I'm curious on I read the comments regarding the mobile home parks, and we have a greater number than a lot of the other cities, and I think 5 parks in total. And I'm curious if there was any discussion at all about, since you've also talked a lot about low-income housing needs, and if there's anything in there with regards to the transition as these mobile home parks become more and more valuable, the land, how that transition might take place, or if that was ever discussed at all, or what maybe the city, how we would look at that or could do to mitigate some of the adverse impacts of displacement.
I don't recall that being specifically discussed. There was some talk about the mobile home parks and what role they play in affordable housing. They play a pretty big role at the very lowest level of housing ownership and renting. And that's one reason we look pretty good compared to other East King County cities in terms of satisfying affordable housing. Nobody's where Arch wants it to be, or nobody's at an ideal level. But we do pretty well at that segment of the market. But I have to wonder if those areas, and I think they are zoned for multifamily already, that would be the displacement. And the key principle behind our housing recommendations was to expand multifamily housing to create more supply, and those units are less expensive than single-family housing. And that is by using the market and encouraging development of that product in that segment of the market, creating more housing options at an affordable price.
Okay, and that makes sense. I actually understand that completely, and I'm just wondering, as a council, if that's something we're comfortable with, and we just let the market work through that process. And I don't know the answer to it. Maybe it's more our issue than it is the housing element issue, but I realize it's something that, I think a great example is just looking at the Spencer 68, and you look across the street and the mobile home park. And if you can build that high of quality and be as successful as they are, then it tells me quite simply that it's just a matter of time, very short time probably, before there's real movement on some of these other properties that are mobile home developments. And I don't know that we've really had much discussion on it at all. And so I was just curious if that came up much in your discussions. And yes.
We did talk about this some, but we also did not dwell on it heavily, and it's because of what the parameters of what our goal, what our task before us is. This is a comprehensive plan. It has objectives that are about the values that we carry as a city, and the objectives are statements of how we want to reach those values. You're talking about, the value of our community is going to increase over time, and it will shift the resources available. The land is probably the most valuable asset we have because there's only so much of it. But I think when it comes to actually putting policy points in there, we can't yet because we don't have enough change happening. But I think if you look on page 125, there are goals and objectives and even some implementation policy that is specific language to what you're talking about. And we didn't change a lot of it. There was some of it that got removed because of the Growth Management Act and those sorts of things. So we're not ignoring it. We're all very aware that it's real. But because it's a comprehensive plan, all we can do is give it some structure. And it will probably be, I'm guessing, an element that gets readdressed probably every couple years based on what the market does. I mean, we could have a little surge in our real estate market for the next 2, 3, 4 years, and then it might just dip off and disappear for a while. Hope not. But I think what we have to think about is, do we have things in place in this plan that can address those needs of our citizens? And it's pretty clear language that we're willing to accommodate the citizens that rent or maybe own those mobile homes.
And that makes sense. I'm looking at it from the standpoint that if somebody comes in tomorrow and has a development plan, we don't have a policy, or we don't address it really much more than saying, there's terms like we'll encourage this and recommend this, or we prefer that. But those aren't hard words at all. Those are just soft, because encourage, what is encourage? I mean, encourage is just a nice word. And so that's the only reason I bring this up. I'm just trying to see if it went anywhere further. I absolutely agree with you on the point that it is a policy issue. And I'm just trying to fine-tune whether or not there's anything else that was talked about that maybe didn't get included, that maybe was part of that discussion. And really, I guess, as much as anything, just knowing that it is a big part of our downtown, these parts, and I think we can all see the writing on the wall that it's coming, and it's pretty amazing in a way that we haven't had one come up yet that it's been an issue, and so that was my main point on that. And I do have one other really quick question that has to do with let's see, it had to do with the manufactured homes, and it was policy, I guess on our agenda, it's page 237, and it's H 28.3.1, and it says allow designated manufactured homes built to state standards on single-family lots. And my question there is that, I know that there are covenants in a number of the developments and plats around here that would not allow manufactured home, but is this as it already is now in our policy? Do you know that any single-family lot can have a manufactured home, assuming there are no covenants restricting that?
Yes, that's true, but the city doesn't enforce private covenants. So
no, and I understand that part. But if somebody went into a non-platted buildable lot, they could, with no covenants, they could put a manufactured home anywhere in the city. Okay.
Yes.
I don't think I was aware of that until I read this. Okay, thank you.
And Councilmember Smith, on your prior comment about addressing the transition of mobile home parks, that could be something that could be addressed in the housing strategy plan, that was sort of a future work program item, unless there is sort of strong feelings on the council that to implement or to insert a specific policy at this point.
I don't have actually a specific plan or idea yet. I just know there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and I know there's also state and I believe county regulations as well that impact the conversion and so I don't know enough information to know what those policies should be, but I would be more than happy to have a discussion about it.
Councilmember Herbig.
Debbie just mentioned the housing strategy. When would we expect to be working on that document?
I think it's either, I think it might be 2017. I could be wrong on that. I didn't bring forward sort of the upcoming years for work program items. But obviously, every year the council assigns the docket or the work program items, whether it's for the Planning Commission or that the council wants to consider each year for amendments to the comprehensive plan and or development regulations. So that discussion of the docket for 2016 will be bringing forward to the council in January of 2016. And at that point, we usually kind of take a look at the year, and then we also identify future work program items as well. And then it's up to the council as to how to assign the priorities for those work program items.
If I can add to that or ask a further question about that. So at the January City Council retreat, we had a matrix or a table that showed when things like that are going to come in front of the council. So is your best recollection that it comes forward in 2017?
That's my best recollection. Unfortunately, I don't have that document right in front of me, and I'm certainly tomorrow can pull that up and provide that to council so you can kind of see where that might be.
Well, I was asking because what Councilmember Smith brought up is kind of something that I worry about a lot right now. I worry about with the market picking up, and especially with multifamily market kind of exploding the way it is right now. I do worry about somebody in the next 6 months or a year buying out that the mobile home park and displacing all those families, and we don't have any place for them to go, and we don't have, I don't think, strong enough policies in place about how to deal with that. And I think this is a discussion worth having sooner rather than later, because if we don't have a policy in place, then we don't have any say over what's going on there beyond the county and state regulations. So I would encourage I would encourage us to try to move that discussion up a little bit, because as we've seen, even the affordable units that are being built in the Spencer 68 are not really affordable for anybody who's living in the mobile home park. So I think we need to get a clearer vision of what we're going to do, because they will be bought up, and we need to figure out a way to deal with that.
So we've got a lot of people here. So it's Councilmember Sperry, then Councilmember Curtis will come down, then Councilmember Dennis, and then Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Sperry.
Well, going back to the mobile homes, I think that for many years now we've had these dual goals. You know, one is you think, oh, downtown, we're going to have redevelopment, it's all going to look great, and we're seeing evidence of this across the street. And then you look over and see all the families that live in the mobile home park and think, where are they going to go? And so it's a tension, and it's a hard thing, you know, for all of us. I think one of the things that might be helpful, since it's kind of brought up, is just to have a little bit of a memo on what the state laws are, because I know that this has come up before, and you know, if they don't own the land, there's quite a number of process and things that are already in place for people that are going through that kind of a transition. Okay. So this is a second thing, totally different. One of the questions I had when I was looking under the strategy, I think it was page 16 or something. It just said that we had done impact fees. We had waived a portion of impact fees for several projects that incorporated housing affordable to low-income households. And it maybe was done before I started on the council, but I just couldn't remember us doing that. And I just wondered if somebody could look through the history book and see when we did that. It hasn't been recently that I'm aware of, waiving impact fees.
You can waive a certain amount of impact fees for certain affordable housing projects. In the past, the city then had to reimburse that money. There was a recent change in state law that said that if you gave an exemption, that the city doesn't have to kind of reimburse that. So what we can do is maybe part of that memo is also have a paragraph there on the requirements for waiving impact fees, what the laws are, and maybe identify which projects we did provide a waiver for.
So it sounds like it's something that was done in the past, but now perhaps since the laws changed, not as frequently. Is that kind of the
I think what it does,
version?
I think the change in the law would actually make it easier for the city, because the city doesn't have to reimburse that exempt amount. So if there is an affordable housing project that qualifies, the city can grant an exemption without having to then pick up that money and sort of reimburse itself. So I think it makes it easier.
Yeah, I mean, especially if down the road, that would be helpful to know about. Yeah.
Okay.
Councilmember Curtis.
So it looks like, at least at a high level, you guys have at least thought of some of this. So policy H28.2.4 used density bonuses, inclusionary programs, and other methods with mixed use and multifamily developments to provide housing affordable to low and moderate income households. And then 2.6, ensure that affordable housing achieved through public incentives or assistance remains affordable for the longest possible term. And then objective 28.3, provide zoning and development standards that integrate affordable housing compatibility into the community. So at least there are some high-level things that say this is important to us, but that next step that people are talking about probably can't wait till 2017 to get a little more details. But that's not your job.
Right, and that's sort of what Commissioner Baker was alluding to and Commissioner Smith was alluding to. You see the word encourage and support throughout these comp plan amendments and the comp plan before we amended it, and that's all it is high-level recommendations. None of it's binding, and you know, the rubber meets the road when you make zoning regulations or you propose affordable housing incentives or you build affordable housing directly or that kind of thing. That's what you're getting at.
Councilmember Danuski.
I was just going to point out there is a little bit of relocation wording in policy H28 1.2, which is page 20 of the agenda bill, that says encourage relocation assistance and replacement housing to be developed where feasible help very low and low-income housing when displacement is unavoidable. And it talks about mobile homes on that. Is that currently being done, and would that be Arch that's helping out on that?
The city doesn't have a pool of money, and if I can kind of
trying to
catch
remember the
Mr.
Arch
Sullivan's eye, maybe I can
presentation.
grab his attention on that. If Mayor, if you would allow Mr. Sullivan to respond to the question about Arch
Mr.
resources.
No, we're not doing it. I was thinking Arch had a hand in that one.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Arthur Sullivan, Program Manager of Arch. From many of your comments, all very well taken and made, you pointed out a policy that sort of sets the stage. You mentioned there's another policy about preserving existing affordable housing, very general statement, as was made by your commissioner. Then you have the housing strategy plan. And the whole concept of the strategy plan is to take your policy and say, what could we do? And it's not saying you are going to do it when you do the strategy plan. It says, what are we going to study first? What are we going to work on first? Prioritize to implement these policies. So to your point about what's the timing of doing a strategy plan. So that's when you would list in terms of like, do we want, we have helped preserve, I mean, the Arts Trust Fund, it's city funds, including yours, has helped one group who's a nonprofit buy an existing mobile home community in another city and keep it under nonprofit ownership. So that has been done once before. So it's not completely outside the realm of possibilities. This is describing something a little bit different where you're helping individual homeowners if they're not going to be able to be preserved. So the purpose of the strategy plan is to start listing a whole lot of different strategies that could actually get into some more actionable items, either through regulations or programs or a zoning code. And so, yes, these things set up lots of possibilities. The strategy plan sets the roadmap for you to explore them in more explicit detail.
So is Arch currently, if a homeowner needs some help, can they
We
go to
currently, what we have right now, or what has been funded by cities, again, nothing's an Arch program, it's your programs. You have funded a down payment assistance program for first-time buyers. And we got funding from the county and the state. And we've helped an individual manufactured housing park be bought by a nonprofit. Have we done something quite like this? No. Does it mean it's outside the realm of possibilities? Not necessarily, but we have not done anything explicitly like that. So it could be explored if that's something that we're in the strategy plan that you want to look at hard. And when you do the strategy plan, you don't say, we are going to do this. It says, this is a topic we want to research to figure out if it makes sense for us to do. Okay? And sets a time frame for doing that.
And just one totally separate comment on page 31 of the agenda bill. There's about 2/3 way down, there's the word river that's got a typo in it. So I guess that proves I read it. It's got 2 R's on it.
Can you tell me what that was again? I'm sorry.
Page 30 on the agenda bill, which would be...
Is there a policy number or
hold
something?
on.
Because we don't have pages.
Oh, you don't have it? Okay. Let me find it. I will have to look for it. I'll raise my hand again when I find it.
Deputy Mayor?
My questions have been answered by the previous questions.
So I have a few questions myself here. One of the things is that the mobile home parks, they are privately owned, and isn't it usually the case where affordable housing has a time period that they are to remain affordable for? In other words, this is privately owned, it's on the market, it could be sold tomorrow. There's nothing in place that says it has to remain affordable for any length of time. For instance, Spencer 68, the units that went in there, they have to remain affordable for a period of time. There's no such restrictions on mobile home parks or any other of that type of lower income housing that they have in the community. So I'm concerned because we're seeing it more and more that people can't afford to live here. For instance, my understanding is Buddy Hunt can't live here because he can't find a place to stay. That's affordable for somebody with his income and that type of job. I think you take most people working at the coffee shop, working at the supermarket, working wherever, they can't afford to live close to work because there's nothing affordable. So I think that we really need to have some policies in place that help us deal with this issue, because there are some things in this section that indicate we're doing something. For instance, here on housing elements 5 through 9, I think it's page 238 of 295. It says that most of Kenmore's affordable housing, lower incomes, is rental housing, and 35% of these rental units in Kenmore were affordable to low and very low income families. But quite a large part of that is the mobile home parks, which may or may not be around for any substantial length of time. And we've received this letter from the Housing Development Consortium that seems to indicate that there is a serious lack of affordable housing in the community. So, and I know when I sat on the Joint Recommendations Committee dealing with homeless issues and affordable housing in the area, there's a huge shortage. So I'm wondering, can we afford to wait until 2017 to try to get policies in place? Is that what the current schedule is?
Yes, that is currently says 2017 or later. So again, as I indicated, the council can certainly move that up as a priority. It would then likely involve moving another work program item further down the list. So again, when we bring this forward to you in January, that's where you'll be having that discussion. Staff also provides a recommendation at that point as well. And I will make sure that what was presented to you at the council retreat, we will forward to you. You'll be able to see that with fresh eyes tomorrow, but we'll be having that discussion in January next year.
So one of the other things is on page 239 of 295, the cost-burdened households. You're talking 42% of the rental households in Kenmore are cost-burdened. In other words, those figures they're spending over half their income on housing. And the housing targets, you're saying that the city should expect and plan for 149 additional units each year. Is that 149 units of affordable housing or just 149 units of housing?
Just housing in general.
Just housing in general. And then a little bit further on, there is policy 1127, or 27.1.3, it's a strikeout. And there's two, H27.1.3 and 27.1.4. And it has to do with developing a volunteer program or some small funds to help with emergency housing or housing repairs. Is there a reason that was struck out? Arthur?
In the introductory statement from the Commission, the statement was made to make this a policy type document. And this was one that the first draft that you had done sort of mixed strategies and policies. So this is exactly something that could show up in the strategy plan. So there were several of those that came out because they were like at a level of detail that you had policy statements that would support doing that, but you use a strategy plan to say exactly how you want to implement the policy. So that was the reason why.
Okay.
Trying to sort of keep it at the same, everything at the same level in this document.
And then on to, what's it, 246 of 295, policy H 28.2.6 and 2.7. We did a change, Mr. City Manager, I think last year where we indicated that 85% tile is where affordability is in Kenmore.
Debbie or Lori, feel free to jump in, but when a project is going to have an affordable component, the city council changed the code to say that affordable means 85% of King County median income.
Correct.
So looking at those two policies, 28.2.6 and .7, to ensure affordable housing achieved through public incentives or assistance remain affordable for the longest possible term, and collaborate with other local governments directly and through membership associations like Puget Sound Regional Council on regional housing strategies, especially related to providing low and very low income housing. How is that going to be affected by the decision that we made of having the affordability at 85%? I mean, in one sense, we're set at 85, but now we're saying the low and very low, we should be working with other groups. Arthur?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
So I think what I would comment on is if you look at 28.4, that's for density, that's the density bonuses, which is what the land use program was, and that does include moderate. So the idea, and then when you get to the other one, as you correctly stated, was the very low and low. And sort of what was the philosophy that we've been communicating with cities is through the new countywide planning policies, they're trying to acknowledge all three levels. And they're saying, you know, the low and the moderate, you can sometimes get done on your own, you know, if you get creative enough and lucky enough. But when you start doing the very low and often low income, it really takes the partnerships, like the partnership that you created that I work for, which is Arch, where you combine your funding and we get county and state funds. Because to try to get all the way down to that lowest level on your own is really difficult, and it really does take help from other players to get there. So that's the distinguishment between those two policies. One is saying on your own, kind of the things you have control of, look at you moderate and low if you can, and then but work cooperatively to try to work on the very low and low. So that's sort of the distinguishment between those two policies.
Okay. That answers it. Thank you. Councilmember Curtis.
Just a comment on that. It looks like table H through F kind of defines very low as 30th percent area of median, and low income is 50%, and then moderate income is 80. At least so there are definitions in here. When you use a word, it equates to something numerical.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Yes, please.
Thank you. The housing analysis done by the Planning Commission, as City Planner Anderson pointed out, was done last year for the most part. So we had 3 different commissioners who since retired. They've been replaced with the new commissioners. They haven't really commented at great length about the commission-wide discussion on this. So I wanted to bring some of that in, the discussion that took place, to the extent I can remember it, last December and November when we had the older commission taking this up with Arthur attending the meetings and his colleague. And one of the points that we were wrestling with was how Kenmore fits into the East King County scheme of affordable housing. And I didn't see it in this material, but I remember seeing some documents that we looked at that you might want to look at as you take up this discussion at more length, that showed Kenmore at something like 65% of the median price of East King County housing, far lower than other cities in East King County. And we were doing well with the mobile home parks at very low income levels. We look pretty good compared to our neighbors. As I said before, we're not where Arch wants us to be. Nobody in East King County is where Arch wants us to be. But the question we have to ask, that we were asking and discussing as a commission, was, where do we stand relative to our neighbors? What can we afford as a city? We all would love to have affordable housing for people who live here. We would love to have the mobile home park tenants and owners be able to stay or go to a place suitable for them. But housing, affordable housing, is really expensive. And as the market goes up, it gets more expensive because you've got to make up the difference if you want to directly subsidize people. And you've got to compare that to what are our other priorities? Parks, the waterfront, business growth. We're not a wealthy city. We've got chronic surface water management problems. You know, we've got a very low retail sales tax base. We want to promote, and this is a classic economic challenge for private and public sector, particularly public sector. Do we try to create growth in our economy that makes it more affordable for us to subsidize things like housing? Or do we take on housing without that economic growth, and how far can we get if we put that as our higher priority? anyway, I'm not advocating for either side of this argument, but I am saying those are things that we discussed back in December with Arthur and the staff presenting those materials.
Yeah, I think some of the incentives that we can offer help make that a little more palatable, where you could go, let's say, R48 with nothing, and we'll give you R65 if you give us a few units of affordable.
Exactly, Mr. Mayor, and that's where we came down. It was like our most cost-effective way of trying to create affordable housing was through the market and creating incentives for developers to come in and create that density in those lower-cost units.
Anything else? Yeah, Councilmember Danuski.
I just found that typo was in the public service element 9-7 in the fire EMS section, where it says within Kenmore in 2013 the average response time blah 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 in that sentence. So that's where it is.
Deputy Mayor and then Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I appreciate what Commissioner Nugent said about incentives and so on. For example, over at Spencer 68, we could have had the 25% at 50%, but we would have had to give the property to them. And you don't get the income from the property, you can't buy things with the property, like the town green. So it's a trade-off. Somebody's got to support this at, what, $100,000, $50,000 a unit, I think it was. A unit. It had to be subsidized somehow, from somewhere. And maybe if you can do the trade-offs, that you can have a higher density or go up to a higher level vertically, then maybe it becomes worthwhile to the developers to do that. There is assistance from other sources, through Arch, through various grants. In this case, since we own the property, it was Kenmore that had to fund the affordable housing. And it was a trade-off. And we wanted this development over here to set the tone for what we wanted to see develop in the way of an economic development in the area as well. And if you loaded it up with real low-income housing like we were going to have with Urban Partners when they bailed out on the condos way back when, and we're going to build 100 units of low and extra low income housing, I don't think that would have attracted the kind of commercial development that we wanted. So, yes, it's a trade-off. And should the taxpayers be supporting that, subsidizing this low income housing, or can it be subsidized in some other way? And that's where we need that discussion of the strategy that we probably should move on sooner rather than later.
Councilmember Smith.
On those incentives, is that a permitting and administrative level change that's done, or is that only done through a development agreement?
There are currently regulations in the code that establish the affordability levels. That was, as you just have discussed, were recently changed. Any deviation from those standards could be accomplished through the development agreement, if that was a tool that was available to a developer. So that's how it would currently work. So right now there are sort of incentives for affordable housing, and one other thing to think about is when we bring the transit-oriented district back to you, there are also incentives for affordable housing there too that would allow a higher density if you provide more levels of affordability.
Good, thank you. And then I did have a comment on the public services element, and it's on the implementation strategies, and at the very bottom of the bullet points it says development of a recreational guide to promote locations and opportunities for physical activity, and I thought that was a really cool idea. And so I know it's just one of the strategies, but I really like that a lot. I thought that would be really nice. And then lastly, I just want to say thanks for your work on this. There's a lot of work I know you put into it, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Curtis, you had something? Nope. Okay. Yeah, this affordability thing. I mean, I'm looking at many thousands of people are retiring and on Social Security and didn't plan necessarily for living longer than what they thought they would live. So, I mean,
The curse of longevity.
Anything else? Nothing? Thank you, guys.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
So the Planning Commission will be back in front of you June 1st. So the public hearing tomorrow, they'll be deliberating on this on May 5th, and then you will be receiving a very large packet for the June 1st joint meeting.
Very good. Thank you. Staff report.
Yeah, just a couple things. Debbie and Lori are attending their professional association conference. It's the national one that happens to be in Seattle, and it's been going on for a few days. Tomorrow's the last day, and we are bringing a few of the attendees to Kenmore for a mobile workshop, and we're going to feature what we've done on our waterfront. And the mobile workshop is also going to include Kirkland's waterfront. So we're kind of our message is kind of a new city work in progress waterfront, and here's what you get when you've been around for 100 years in Kirkland. So
I hope we're going first.
Yeah.
We're going first.
Yeah. So I really appreciate them setting that up. That was a lot of work on their part. And then also I wanted to thank Arthur. Arthur, thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it. Yes, thanks, Arthur. Also, we had a new employee start last week. His name is Quinn Proffitt, Proffitt, and he decided to work in the public sector where you can't make a profit. So, but he's our maintenance worker, our full-time maintenance worker, and I've met him and I'm really impressed with him. So, if you recall, we added that position in the budget, and it's what we informally call our drop what you're doing maintenance worker, so that we can be a little more responsive and also target certain things a little better. And then next week will be Brett Schock's first day. I think it's Monday or Tuesday of next week. He's the new traffic engineer, so we're really excited to have him. At some point, I'd like these new employees to come to a city council and say hello to you, just so you can get to know them. We'll probably do that in May. We're also recruiting for Nancy Meehan's replacement in development services. I hope you all know, maybe you don't, but I have appointed Nancy to be the regular executive assistant in the city manager's office. And so she's left a vacancy in development services, and we're recruiting for that position. And I believe we're having interviews, or Debbie and Brian are interviewing for that position on Wednesday.
We are. There are 220 applicants for that position.
Wow. Must be great.
I'm very hopeful. We will be interviewing 6 candidates on Wednesday.
And I'm heading out of state to go watch my daughter graduate from college starting really early Thursday morning. So I'll be back Sunday night. And so I've got to figure out who acting city manager is while I'm gone. And I haven't figured that out because Nancy's gone too. So, Debbie, are you around?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Never mind. I figured it out.
Debbie wins.
All right. Comments, initiatives, reports. Councilmember Smith.
Well, I was just thinking it'd be interesting if that new employee had a daughter named Annette. Wouldn't that be good? Annette?
Annette
Proffitt.
Annette Proffitt.
Anyway.
You got to say it and think about it.
I'm sure he's heard that. The only thing I had to add was I enjoyed the fire commissioners meeting the other night, and it was really interesting because I felt like a lot of what they talked about were exactly the things that I would have been concerned about if I were a commissioner and if I were a citizen. And so it was really nice I felt very comfortable that that they're not comfortable with this process. Doesn't mean that there isn't something that will come of it. Just the questions and the discussions were right on topic, I thought, and it was quite interesting to hear the thoughts and the concerns about this RFA. And so, for whatever that's worth, that's it.
Councilmember Sperry.
No one-on-ones this week, is that true?
That's right.
Okay, great, thanks. This is a little random, but you know how we've got all these plans for Hank Herron? Well, I have a new plan for Hank Herron, possibly. I was listening on the TV, and there's evidently a character that WSU has, and it's like Dr. Cat. And so they have people write in and ask Dr. Cat questions. And I thought, well, maybe the kids could ask Hank things or something. I don't know. That was kind of a cute idea. I don't know if you want to, use it for your healthy stuff or whatever, but I thought it was pretty cute. And they showed little postcards and everything. Of course, she had glasses and looked really smart, so I don't know. Maybe not.
Councilmember Curtis.
Well, I've been thinking about what we heard last week about all you need for a successful downtown is 20 businesses and 20 restaurants within 3 blocks. And so I was thinking about that. And I thought, between 65th and 73rd, we have 8 blocks. Now, some are already taken for city halls and fire departments and things like that, and so can't move those. But there's still some space that hasn't been used. It's all under private ownership. I understand that. But what my question is, can we as a city somehow be proactive in reaching out to like the Chacos and the people who own the blank lot over here on the other side of the storage place, and the one just beside that with the little smoke shop, and those few remaining parcels that if they developed in a way that wouldn't be favorable, in other words, a big front without very many businesses and openings, we could lose what little opportunity we have here. So I don't know exactly what my ask is, except can we think about touching bases with those folks to say, if you have any ideas, we as a city have a vision for 20 businesses and 20 restaurants in this area, 8 blocks, and it seems like somebody should get excited about that idea.
I love that idea and fully intend to. We've already reached out to Mrs. Chaco. Had a meeting with her a few weeks ago, and she can't do anything right now because she's waiting for that cleanup to happen, which is going to take several years. But the other property owners, definitely we need to get in touch with again and let them know that we're excited for a vibrant downtown, and we're willing to facilitate the development of their properties.
I think by the end of next year, when we have our town green with our pavilion, and if people already know, kind of this is our vision, and they see that actually happening, I think it has the potential for going somewhere.
Yeah, we're going to have a great story to tell here pretty soon, especially if Evergreen can come in as a tenant and all that. So
it's in our capital improvement project plan.
Oh, good. Good.
Just excited to say this is the last Monday that I'll be jetting up from Olympia to come to one of these meetings. So
yeah,
I'm very excited about that.
Councilmember Danuski.
Nothing for me.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. I don't know whether you're all aware about the car that ran into Speedy Reedy last week. A lady, I don't know, must have hit the gas instead of the brake. A lady, 60s maybe, and just plowed right into the front of the old restaurant building that they're remodeling. And it's sad because Reed Siller, he and his wife have this business, and he's doing a lot of the work himself on that building, doing all the framing inside, and it's a labor of love for him. And here something crashes right into it. Not only broke the door, the garage door thing that they had there, but actually hit the concrete blocks and knocked them off the foundation a bit. So the extent of the damage really hasn't been determined yet. I was talking to him over the weekend. The car caught fire. The lady was in the hospital. It was quite an impact. And so he still hasn't figured out how he's going to resolve the whole thing. But if you get a chance, those are two neat people, Brooke and Reed Siller, in this Speedy Reed triathlon business that they're in. Stop in, say hello. They're just neat people. And young couple, and they've got this business. It's a niche business. It'll draw a lot of people into the city of Kenmore. And anything we can do to help them, I think, would be great. But a little moral support for him might be good. Praising him on what he's doing. Now, he's doing all the framing inside the whole building. Replaced the whole concrete floor. 40 years of greasy restaurants going in there. There was a lot to tear out and start over on. It's kind of like the Money Pit movie. That you remember that thing where every time they turned around, there was another few $1,000s they had to put into it. So.
Yeah, nice big windows. It looks like a really
nice the whole west side of the building is all glass now. Lots of light coming in. The front, those 3 garage door things, they can open them up and let the fresh air in, and it's going to be really neat.
It's going to be a neat place. Saturday, Park Appreciation Day. Anybody up to help me cook?
I'll be there volunteering so I can cook too.
Okay, because we're going to have like about 50 hamburgers or whatever. Yes, and we need to talk about that too.
Okay.
So, Saturday, let's say 11:30 till 1, Rhododendron Park. So anybody feels like coming out and helping cook, it would be much appreciated. Yeah, anybody ask you about peace or use your own judgment? We're going to need new radios. And that's about the only way we're going to get them for police and fire. So,
Can I tell my
absolutely, please.
It really surprised me that the tax burden of that Proposition 1 is as low as it is. I served on that committee in the first couple of years of it until there were the technicians talking way above me, and I didn't understand what was going on. But only those that were putting money into the project, King County and Seattle and so on, were really involved in the decision, so I finally dropped off it. But the area needs new communication equipment. What they have is very outdated. No, it's so outdated that Motorola is not going to be servicing it anymore. And so we have to do something, or the whole system is just going to be a downward spiral. So I don't know whether we've taken a stand on it, but
We haven't. We've got to be very careful.
yeah.
Say facts.
Yeah.
We can't really.
But it's $7 per thousand per
The
year.
average homeowner's cost is about $27 a year.
Yeah. So something I think we need as much as we need, if not more than the fingerprinting thing. It will also come for renewal sometime here in the future.
So I guess with that, we are adjourned.